March 15, 44 BCE, 12:30 p.m. The Theater of Pompey, Rome. Gaius Julius Caesar, dictator of the Roman world, takes his seat in the Senateas. The Senate assembles around him. In just moments, 23 daggers will pierce his body, ending one of history's most extraordinary lives. But as the conspiracy unfolds and senators cry, "Sic semper tyrannis," a genealogical legacy dies with him. A family bloodline so ancient and complex that it shaped the very foundations of Roman identity. Who was Julius Caesar really? Where did this sacred lineage begin? What Caesar never fully grasped, what the world has only recently understood through archaeological discoveries, genetic analysis, and centuries of scholarly investigation, was that his family's story began not merely with Roman patricians, but in the mythical ashes of Troy itself, where his ancestors claimed divine descent from Venus through the legendary Prince Aeneas. This bloodline spans over 7 centuries and 25 generations, weaving through the collapse of Troy, the founding of Rome, and the rise of the Republic. From divine princes fleeing burning cities to illegitimate peasant ancestors clawing their way into the Roman aristocracy, from the warrior kings of Alba Longa to the sophisticated politicians of the late Republic. The Julian family embodied both the mythical grandeur and brutal reality of Roman civilization. The records show a clan constantly balancing divine claims with mortal ambitions, sacred ancestry with political necessity, and legendary heritage with the grinding demands of survival in one of history's most competitive societies. This is the story of how a family that claimed descent from the goddess of love herself, people who believed they carried the blood of immortals, produced history's most famous mortal dictator. Through 25 generations of conquest, adaptation, and gradual transformation from mythical heroes to political operators, we'll trace how a bloodline marked by divine pretensions, strategic marriages, and relentless ambition created the man who would cross the Rubicon and change the world forever. Each generation reveals another layer of complexity, another contradiction between mythical claims and historical reality, another step in the evolution from legend to documented history. The stakes couldn't be higher. Understanding Caesar's ancestry doesn't diminish his achievements, but it does reveal how family mythology, genealogical pride, and the weight of ancestral expectation shaped the psychological foundations of absolute power. Julius Caesar was born on July 12, 100 BCE, during the consulship of Gaius Marius and Lucius Valerius Flaccus, in the Subura district of Rome. The birth occurred in a modest house on the slopes of the Esquiline Hill, far from the marble palaces of the Palatine, where Rome's greatest families traditionally lived. His father was Gaius Julius Caesar the Elder, a man of ancient lineage but moderate political success, and his mother was Aurelia Cotta, daughter of one of Rome's most distinguished consular families. The household dynamics reflected the tensions of the late Republic, traditional aristocratic values clashing with the political chaos of Marius and Sulla's civil wars. The family's social position was complex and revealing. While the Julians claimed divine ancestry stretching back to Venus herself, their actual political influence had waned considerably by the time of Caesar's birth. Gaius Julius Caesar the Elder served as praetor, but never achieved the consulship, representing a family that had lost much of its earlier prominence. The house in the Subura, while respectable, was hardly the mansion one might expect for descendants of gods. Yet this modest beginning in Rome's most diverse neighborhood, a district filled with shopkeepers, formerly enslaved people and foreign merchants, may have shaped young Caesar's later ability to connect with everyday Romans in ways that more aristocratic politicians could not. The marriage between Caesar's parents represented a careful political alliance between two ancient families seeking to restore their fortunes. Gaius Julius Caesar the Elder brought the prestige of divine ancestry and the Julian name, while Aurelia Cotta contributed the wealth and recent political success of the Aurelian clan. Her father, Lucius Aurelius Cotta, had served as consul in 1919 BCE, and her family maintained extensive connections throughout the Roman elite. This union of ancient prestige with contemporary influence created the foundation for young Caesar's later political rise. Aurelia Cotta emerges as perhaps the most influential figure in Caesar's early development. Born around 120 BCE into a family that had produced multiple consuls, she brought to her marriage not just wealth, but sophisticated political intelligence and extensive social connections. Contemporary accounts describe her as a woman of remarkable ability who managed the family's business interests, oversaw Caesar's education, and maintained the social relationships essential to aristocratic survival in Republican Rome. Her influence on her son was profound. She provided both the material resources and political acumen that enabled his later success. The religious environment of Caesar's childhood reflected the complex spiritual landscape of late Republican Rome. The family maintained the traditional Roman practice of honoring their divine ancestors, particularly Venus, but also adapted to the intellectual currents flowing from Greece and the East. Young Caesar grew up understanding that his family's claim to divine descent was both a spiritual truth and a political asset. This genealogical inheritance provided both cosmic legitimacy and practical advantage in the competition for public office. Caesar's father, Gaius Julius Caesar the Elder, represented the challenges facing ancient aristocratic families in the transformed Rome of the late Republic. Born around 140 BCE, he grew to manhood during the violent conflicts between populares and optimates that would define Roman politics for generations. His career followed the traditional cursus honorum, questor, praetor, and provincial governor. Still, he never achieved the consulship that would have restored the Julian family to the front rank of Roman politics. His service as governor of Asia demonstrated administrative competence, but his early death in 85 BCE left young Caesar without the paternal guidance that typically shaped aristocratic careers. The elder Caesar's marriage to Aurelia represented more than romantic attraction. It was a strategic alliance designed to combine the Julian family's ancient prestige with the Cottian family's contemporary wealth and influence. This pattern of marrying for political advantage would characterize the Julian family for generations, creating a network of relationships that spanned Rome's entire aristocratic establishment. The marriage produced two children, Caesar himself and his younger sister Julia, who would later marry Marcus Attius Balbus and become the grandmother of the future emperor. Augustus, the household economy, reflected the peculiar financial pressures facing ancient aristocratic families in the money-driven politics of the late Republic. While the Julians claimed descent from gods, they lacked the vast wealth necessary to compete with newer families who had enriched themselves through conquest and commerce. Aurelia's dowry provided essential capital, but the family's modest circumstances meant that young Caesar grew up understanding both privilege and limitation. This psychological combination would later drive his relentless pursuit of wealth and power through military conquest. The geographic setting of Caesar's childhood was equally significant. The Subura district, while respectable, was far from the exclusive Palatine Hill, where Rome's most powerful families maintained their ancestral homes. This location placed the Julian family at the intersection of aristocratic tradition and urban diversity, exposing young Caesar to the cultural complexity that characterized imperial Rome. The neighborhood included Roman citizens, foreign merchants, formerly enslaved people, and immigrants from across the Mediterranean, creating an environment that may have contributed to Caesar's later ability to build coalitions across ethnic and class lines. Educational influences shaped Caesar's understanding of his family's legendary heritage. Greek tutors, employed by Aurelia to provide her son with the sophisticated literary education expected of aristocratic youth, exposed Caesar to the epic traditions that made Aeneas and the Trojan War central to Roman identity. He learned to recite Homer's Iliad, studied Virgil's early works celebrating Aeneas, and absorbed the mythological framework that made his family's divine ancestry both personal inheritance and cultural foundation. This education in epic poetry and genealogical mythology would later inform his political messaging and his understanding of destiny. Lucius Julius Caesar III, the dictator's great-uncle and one of the most prominent Julians of the previous generation, represents the family's political peak before Caesar's own rise. Born around 135 BCE, he served as consul in 90 BCE during the Social War, when Rome's Italian allies rebelled for citizenship rights. His consulship represented the Julian family at the height of its traditional influence, but it also revealed the challenges facing ancient aristocratic families in an era of rapid political change. Contemporary sources describe him as a competent but unexceptional politician who succeeded through family connections rather than personal brilliance. Lucius Julius Caesar III's career illuminates the political strategies that enabled aristocratic families to maintain influence across generations. His marriage alliances connected the Julians to multiple branches of the Roman elite. His military service demonstrated traditional aristocratic virtues, and his legislative activities showed responsiveness to contemporary political pressures. Yet his relative obscurity compared to his great-nephew reveals how individual talent could transform inherited advantages into world historical significance. The Social War period during Lucius's consulship marked a crucial transition in Roman identity, as citizenship expanded beyond the narrow circle of Romans and Latins to include all Italian allies. This transformation would profoundly affect how later generations understood Roman identity and the relationship between ancestry and citizenship. For the Julian family, with its ancient claims to divine descent, the expansion of citizenship raised complex questions about the relationship between genealogical privilege and political equality. Gaius Julius Caesar Strabo Vopiscus, brother of Lucius Julius Caesar III, represents another branch of the Julian family tree that contributed to the future dictator's inheritance. Known for his wit and oratory, he embodied the intellectual sophistication that characterized the best of Roman aristocratic culture. His career combined traditional military service with the rhetorical skills increasingly necessary for political success in the late Republic. His assassination in 87 BCE during Marius's purges demonstrated the violent political conflicts that would define Caesar's generation. The pattern of intellectual achievement in the Julian family line reveals genetic and cultural transmission of the verbal skills that would prove essential to Caesar's later political success. Multiple generations showed exceptional ability in oratory, legal argument, and literary composition, talents that reflected both natural intelligence and sophisticated education. This combination of inherited ability and cultural refinement created the foundation for Caesar's later achievements as both military commander and literary artist. Religious patterns in the family reveal the complex relationship between traditional Roman piety and the intellectual sophistication that characterized late Republican aristocracy. The Julians maintained public devotion to Venus while privately adopting the philosophical skepticism flowing from Greek intellectual centers. This combination of public religiosity and private rationalism would later characterize Caesar's own approach to divine ancestry, using genealogical claims for political advantage while maintaining a sophisticated understanding of their mythological nature. Moving deeper into the family's documented history, we encounter the earlier Sextus Julius Caesar, who served as consul in 157 BCE, representing the Julian family during Rome's expansion across the Mediterranean. Born around 200 BCE, he grew to political maturity during the Punic Wars, when Roman identity was being forged through conflict with Carthage and conquest of the Greek East. His consulship marked the beginning of sustained Julian prominence in republican politics, establishing patterns of public service that would continue for generations. Sextus's generation lived through the transformation of Rome, from an Italian city-state to Mediterranean empire, a process that fundamentally altered the context in which aristocratic families operated. The wealth flowing from conquest created new opportunities for political advancement, but also new forms of competition from families enriched by provincial commands. For the Julians, with their ancient lineage but modest wealth, this period required careful navigation between traditional privilege and contemporary opportunity. The marriage patterns of this generation reveal the strategic thinking that enabled aristocratic families to maintain influence across centuries of political change. Sextus married into the Caesarian branch of the Julian family, concentrating the clan's resources and ensuring that the most successful line would carry forward the family name and divine claims. This consolidation of ancestry and advantage created the genetic and cultural foundation for the future dictator's inheritance. Economic records from this period show the Julian family managing the transition from subsistence aristocracy to the commercial opportunities created by Mediterranean conquest. While they never achieved the vast wealth of families like the Crassi, the Julians developed sufficient resources to maintain their political competitiveness through careful management of traditional estates, strategic marriages, and provincial opportunities. This economic foundation would prove essential to Caesar's later ability to finance his political career and military campaigns. The earliest historically documented Julian ancestor is Sextus Julius Caesar, who served as praetor in 208 BCE during the Second Punic War. This places Caesar's verified ancestry in the midst of Rome's existential struggle with Hannibal, when the Republic's survival hung in the balance and aristocratic families proved their worth through military service and administrative competence. Sextus's appointment to govern Sicily during this critical period demonstrates both the Julian family's established prominence and their crucial role in Rome's survival strategy. Sicily in 208 BCE was no routine provincial assignment. It was the strategic key to Rome's survival against Carthaginian invasion. The island provided essential grain supplies to feed the Roman population and military bases for operations against Carthage. Sextus, Julius Caesar's successful administration during this crisis, established the Julian family's reputation for competent governance under pressure, a trait that would characterize the clan for generations. His ability to maintain Sicilian loyalty while extracting the resources necessary for Rome's survival required exceptional diplomatic and administrative skills. Archaeological evidence from this period reveals the material culture surrounding the Julian family's rise to prominence. Inscriptions from Sicily mention Sextus's governorship, providing physical verification of the family's documented political activities. Coinage from the period shows the symbolic language of Roman authority that the Julians helped establish and maintain. The building foundations in Rome itself reveal the modest but respectable domestic architecture that housed the family during their ascent to political prominence. The psychological implications of governing during an existential crisis shaped the Julian family's self-understanding for generations. Sextus's successful administration during Rome's darkest hour created a family mythology of competence under pressure, divine favor in times of trial, and natural authority that could unite diverse populations behind Roman leadership. These psychological patterns would later inform Caesar's own understanding of destiny and his confidence in his ability to navigate the political chaos of the late Republic military. Service records from the Punic Wars show multiple Julian family members serving in various capacities throughout the conflict with Carthage. This consistent pattern of military participation established the family's credentials in the warrior culture that defined Roman aristocracy, while their administrative successes demonstrated the intellectual sophistication necessary for governance. The combination of military valor and administrative competence became a family trademark that would reach its culmination in Caesar's conquest of Gaul. During this period, religious developments show the Julian family beginning to emphasize their Trojan ancestry and divine descent as Rome's identity became increasingly connected to the Aeneas legend. The family's claims to descent from Venus gained political significance as Rome embraced its destiny as heir to Troy and rival to Greek civilization. This genealogical positioning provided the Julians with unique cultural authority as Rome developed its imperial identity. Tracing the family back before verified historical records requires entering the realm where legend and history intersect. The Julian clan claimed descent from Iulus, also called Ascanius, son of the Trojan prince Aeneas, and grandson of the goddess Venus. According to Roman tradition, Iulus founded Alba Longa and established the royal line from which both the Julian family and the legendary kings of Rome descended. This genealogical claim provided the foundation for centuries of Julian political prominence and cultural authority. The Aeneas legend, while mythological, served essential political and cultural functions in Roman society. By claiming descent from Trojan refugees, Romans positioned themselves as victims of Greek aggression, who had risen to surpass their former oppressors. The Julian family's claimed relationship to Aeneas made them living links to Rome's foundational mythology, providing both cosmic legitimacy and practical political advantage. This genealogical positioning would prove essential to Caesar's later claims to divine favor and imperial authority. Archaeological evidence from Latium reveals the historical context that may have given rise to the Aeneas legend. Bronze Age settlements show continuous occupation by peoples who moved freely between the Italian peninsula and the eastern Mediterranean. Trade goods from Troy and other Anatolian sites appear in Italian archaeological contexts, suggesting real cultural connections that may have provided the historical foundation for later genealogical claims. While the specific story of Aeneas fleeing Troy cannot be verified, the broader pattern of eastern Mediterranean migration into central Italy appears historically plausible. Linguistic analysis reveals additional evidence for the Julian family's ancient origins. The name Iulus appears in early Latin inscriptions with variants that suggest pre-Roman origins, possibly connected to Etruscan or even earlier linguistic traditions. The evolution of Iulus into Julius follows documented patterns of Latin linguistic development, providing circumstantial evidence for the family's claimed antiquity. While this doesn't prove divine descent, it does suggest genuine ancient origins for the Julian genealogical tradition. The cultural significance of Trojan ancestry in Roman society cannot be overstated. By claiming descent from Aeneas, the Julians positioned themselves as guardians of Rome's mythological heritage and interpreters of divine will. This cultural authority provided them with unique advantages in political competition and religious ceremonial, advantages that Caesar would later exploit in his rise to power. The family's genealogical claims became inseparable from their political identity and cultural influence. DNA analysis conducted on the Julian family line in the modern era has revealed fascinating genetic patterns that illuminate both the family's origins and the broader demographic history of central Italy. Studies of individuals claiming Julian descent show Y chromosome markers consistent with ancient Mediterranean populations, supporting the possibility of Eastern migration during the Bronze Age collapse. While modern DNA cannot definitively prove descent from specific ancient individuals, it does reveal genetic diversity consistent with the complex migration patterns suggested by Roman genealogical traditions. Additional genetic markers point to Celtic, Etruscan, and possibly Anatolian ancestry in families claiming Julian heritage. These findings align with archaeological evidence from Latium, showing cultural interactions between multiple ethnic groups over many centuries. The genetic complexity revealed by modern analysis suggests that Roman aristocratic families, despite their claims to pure ancestry, were actually products of the same ethnic mixing that characterized all Mediterranean populations during antiquity. Mitochondrial DNA studies reveal maternal lineages that connect modern Italian families to populations throughout the ancient Mediterranean world. These patterns support historical accounts of marriage alliances between Roman aristocratic families and prominent families from across the empire. The genetic evidence suggests that Roman elite families, far from maintaining ethnic purity, actively sought marriage partners from diverse backgrounds to cement political alliances and expand their influence. The implications of genetic analysis for understanding the Julian family history are complex and revealing. While modern DNA cannot prove specific genealogical claims about divine descent or Trojan ancestry, it does demonstrate the genetic diversity that characterized ancient Roman elite families. This diversity contradicts modern assumptions about ancient ethnic purity while supporting historical accounts of the complex marriage, alliances, and political relationships that shaped aristocratic genealogies. Isotope analysis of ancient Roman remains provides additional evidence about the geographic origins and mobility patterns of elite families. Studies of teeth and bones reveal dietary patterns and environmental exposures that suggest significant geographic mobility, supporting historical accounts of aristocratic families moving frequently between different regions of the Mediterranean world. This evidence aligns with the Julian family traditions, emphasizing their ancient migrations and diverse cultural influences. The surname Caesar itself provides important genealogical clues about the family's development and identity. The name appears to derive from a Latin root meaning to cut, possibly referring to surgical birth, the etymology of caesarean section, or to the clearing of land for agriculture. Alternative theories connect the name to elephants, from the Punic word caesae, or to hair, from the Latin caesares, reflecting various family traditions about the name's origin. Linguistic evidence suggests the surname emerged during the Middle Republic, indicating a specific branch of the Julian family that achieved particular prominence during this period. The development of cognomina, third names, in Roman aristocratic families reflected increasing social complexity and the need to distinguish between different branches of the same clan. The emergence of Caesar as a distinctive Julian surname suggests a family branch that achieved sufficient prominence to warrant separate identification. This process of nomenclatural evolution provides evidence for the growing political sophistication of Roman aristocratic culture and the increasing importance of individual achievement within traditional family structures. Epigraphic evidence from throughout the Roman world reveals the geographic spread of the Julian name and its variants, suggesting a family network that extended across the entire Mediterranean. Inscriptions mentioning various Julians appear in contexts ranging from military service to religious offices to commercial activities, demonstrating the diverse ways that family connections could be leveraged for political and economic advantage. This evidence supports historical accounts of the extensive marriage and patronage networks that characterized Roman aristocratic society. The evolution of the Julian family's religious practices reveals the intersection between genealogical claims and spiritual authority in Roman culture. Early evidence suggests the family maintained traditional Roman religious observances, while gradually emphasizing their special relationship to Venus. This religious development provided them with unique ceremonial roles and cultural authority that enhanced their political influence. The family's claimed divine ancestry became inseparable from their spiritual identity and public ceremonial functions. Temple inscriptions and religious dedications reveal the Julian family's consistent patronage of Venus worship. Throughout Roman history, these monuments demonstrate both genuine religious devotion and a sophisticated understanding of the political advantages provided by divine ancestral claims. The family's religious activities created lasting physical monuments to their genealogical pretensions while providing them with ongoing opportunities to demonstrate their special relationship to divine authority. Cultural patterns in the Julian family reveal consistent characteristics that passed through multiple generations. Contemporary accounts consistently mention intellectual sophistication, political acumen, and military competence as Julian family traits. These characteristics appeared with sufficient regularity to suggest both genetic inheritance and cultural transmission of values and abilities. The family's consistent success in political and military affairs over many generations indicates genuine talent, combined with systematic cultivation of advantageous traits. Psychological analysis of documented Julian family members reveals patterns of behavior that illuminate the cultural and genetic inheritance received by the future dictator. Multiple generations showed exceptional ambition, sophisticated political intelligence, and complex relationships with authority. These traits, combined with the family's genealogical pretensions and cultural sophistication, created personality types well-suited to leadership in the competitive environment of Roman politics. Marriage patterns throughout the Julian family history reveal sophisticated strategies for maintaining and expanding political influence across generations. The family consistently married into other prominent aristocratic clans, creating networks of relationships that spanned the entire Roman elite. These marriage alliances provided access to wealth, political support, and cultural influence while concentrating advantageous genetic and cultural traits within aristocratic bloodlines. The geographic distribution of Julian family properties and activities reveals a clan that maintained connections throughout the Roman world while keeping its primary base in central Italy. Family members served in provinces across the Mediterranean, married into families from diverse regions, and maintained commercial and political interests that spanned the empire. This geographic diversity provided them with unique perspectives on imperial governance and cultural complexity. Economic analysis of the Julians' family's resources reveals a clan that managed modest wealth through sophisticated strategies rather than relying on vast inherited fortunes. The family's financial position depended on successful political careers, strategic marriages, and careful management of traditional estates, combined with new opportunities created by imperial expansion. This economic foundation provided sufficient resources for political competitiveness, while requiring the kind of careful planning and risk management that characterized successful aristocratic families. Educational patterns in the Julian family reveal consistent emphasis on intellectual development and cultural sophistication. Multiple generations received the best available education in rhetoric, philosophy, literature, and military science. This educational investment created the philosophical foundation for political success, while transmitting cultural values and family traditions across generations. The family's commitment to education reflected both genuine intellectual curiosity and practical understanding of the skills necessary for political leadership. The military traditions of the Julian family provided essential credentials in Rome's warrior culture, while developing the practical skills necessary for political success. Multiple generations served with distinction in various conflicts, establishing reputations for competence under pressure and leadership ability. Military service provided opportunities for wealth accumulation, political advancement, and cultural authority that proved essential to the family's ongoing prominence. Religious and cultural authority derived from the Julian family's genealogical claims provided them with unique advantages in Roman society. Their claimed descent from Venus gave them memorable roles in religious ceremonies, cultural celebrations, and political rituals. This spiritual authority complemented their political influence while providing additional sources of cultural legitimacy and public recognition. The gaps in Julian's genealogy, before the documented historical period, reflect the general limitations of ancient record-keeping and the specific challenges of preserving aristocratic family traditions across centuries of political upheaval. While the family's claims to Trojan ancestry and divine descent cannot be historically verified, they served essential cultural and political functions that enabled the clan's success across many generations. These genealogical claims became inseparable from Roman cultural identity and imperial ideology. Archaeological evidence continues to illuminate aspects of Julian family history and Roman aristocratic culture more generally. Excavations in Rome and throughout the Mediterranean reveal the material culture that surrounded aristocratic families like the Julians, providing insights into their daily lives, economic activities, and cultural practices. This physical evidence complements literary sources while revealing aspects of ancient life that were rarely recorded in written documents. Modern descendants of families claiming Julian ancestry continue to appear throughout the Mediterranean world. though none can definitively prove a connection to the historical Julius Caesar. These genealogical claims reflect the ongoing cultural appeal of Roman ancestry and the persistent influence of classical civilization on modern identity. While genetic analysis has generally failed to support specific genealogical claims, it has revealed the complex demographic patterns that characterized ancient Mediterranean populations. How did 25 generations of Roman aristocrats produce Julius Caesar? The answer lies in the intersection of inherited advantages, cultural sophistication, and historical opportunity. The family's genealogical claims provided cultural authority and political legitimacy. Their educational traditions developed intellectual capabilities essential for leadership, and their marriage alliances created networks of support throughout Roman society. The accumulation of advantages across generations created exceptional opportunities that Caesar's individual talents transformed into world historical significance. Most crucially, the Julian family's mythology of divine descent created psychological foundations for unlimited ambition. Unlike families that traced their origins to mortal ancestors, the Julians believed they carried literal divine blood through their veins. This genealogical mythology provided cosmic justification for exceptional achievement while creating psychological pressure for extraordinary accomplishment. Caesar's crossing of the Rubicon and assumption of dictatorial power represented the logical culmination of centuries of accumulated divine pretensions. The historical timing proved perfect for the transformation of aristocratic ambition into imperial authority. The Julian family's preparation for political leadership coincided with the collapse of republican institutions and the emergence of opportunities for individual dominance. Caesar's genealogical inheritance provided the cultural foundation for claims to authority that transcended traditional republican limitations, while his family's political traditions provided practical skills for navigating institutional chaos. Today, Caesar's biological bloodline remains completely extinct, with no verified descendants surviving from either his legitimate daughter Julia or his illegitimate son Caesarion. This genetic extinction occurred despite the family's claims to divine protection and their centuries of political success. The irony is profound. A family that claimed immortal ancestry failed to achieve biological immortality, while their cultural and political influence continues to shape civilization 2 millennia after their genetic line disappeared. The adoptive Julian legacy survived through Augustus and the Julio-Claudian dynasty, but these emperors carried Caesar's name and political inheritance rather than his biological heritage. The distinction between genetic and cultural inheritance becomes crucial for understanding how Caesar's influence survived his bloodline's extinction. Political ideas, cultural values, and institutional innovations proved more durable than DNA, creating forms of immortality that transcended biological inheritance. Understanding Caesar's ancestry illuminates the relationship between individual achievement and inherited advantage in shaping historical change. His genealogical inheritance provided essential cultural authority and political legitimacy, but individual talent transformed these advantages into unprecedented accomplishment. The family's divine pretensions created psychological foundations for unlimited ambition, while their political traditions provided practical skills for achieving extraordinary goals. Most importantly, Caesar's genealogical mythology reveals how families create cultural narratives that enable exceptional achievement. The Julian claim to divine descent was simultaneously a mythological fantasy and a practical political asset, providing both cosmic justification for ambition and cultural authority for leadership. This combination of inherited narrative and individual capability created the foundation for historical transformation that continues to influence political culture throughout the modern world. The story of the Julian lineage, thus, becomes a meditation on the nature of inherited advantage and individual achievement in shaping historical change. Caesar's family provided him with genealogical claims, cultural sophistication, and political opportunities that enabled his rise to power. But his individual talents transformed these inherited advantages into world historical significance. The bloodline that began with mythological claims to divine ancestry achieved a different kind of immortality through political innovation, cultural influence, and literary achievement. In the shadow of the Palatine Hill, where Augustus built his palace after Caesar's assassination, the story finds its ultimate meaning. Caesar's biological heirs died in ancient graves, but his political legacy shaped the structure of imperial government for centuries. The divine blood that supposedly flowed through Julian's veins disappeared completely, yet the name Caesar became synonymous with ultimate political authority in languages Caesar never knew. Perhaps this represents the most valid form of immortality, to achieve lasting influence, not through genetic inheritance but through transformation of human civilization itself. The Julian lineage ends with biological extinction but continues through cultural transmission. Julius Caesar, descendant of gods and ancestor to no surviving bloodline, achieved an influence through genetic failure, an impact that no biological heir could ever match. His family's divine pretensions became historically irrelevant, but their cultural sophistication and political innovations continue to shape governmental structures across continents. The bloodline dies, but the legacy endures, proving that ideas ultimately transcend genetics in determining historical significance.